October 2020, Lagos, Nigeria. A video was circulating on social media. In it, officers from a plainclothes police unit are seen beating and shooting a young Nigerian man. Within days, the footage had been shared millions of times. Within a week, protests have erupted across one of the most populous nations in Africa. This is the story of #EndSARS, a movement that began as a hashtag, built for 3 years online, and finally erupted on the streets of Nigeria in one of the most significant Gen Z led uprisings of the digital era. To understand why it exploded the way it did and why it mattered, you first need to understand what SARS was. The Special Anti-Robbery Squad, known as SARS, was founded in Lagos in 1992. It started as a small, undercover unit of 15 officers tasked with tackling armed robbery in a city shaken by crime. In its early years, SARS operated covertly by design. Officers wore plain clothes, they drove unmarked vehicles, sometimes with no license plates at all. They were not supposed to look like police. That anonymity, originally a tactical feature, would eventually become a defining source of danger for ordinary Nigerians. As SARS expanded beyond Lagos and grew into a national unit, something else grew alongside it: a pattern of abuse. By 2009, SARS operatives had infiltrated Nigerian universities, targeting suspected internet fraudsters. But in the process, they began harassing innocent students. Young people with dreadlocks, expensive phones, or laptops were profiled as criminals. A tattoo could get you detained. Even owning a car as a young person can make you a suspect. Human rights watchdog Amnesty International first began documenting SARS abuses in 2010. It reported that officers had arrested and beaten detainees over multiple days. By 2016, Amnesty published a full report detailing systematic torture. They found forced confessions, beatings, starvation of detainees, and extrajudicial killings. That same year, a Nigerian publication described SARS as, quote, a police unit with a license to kill. And through the years, abuses continued. A 15-year-old shot into school mistaken for a kidnapper. A bus driver killed for not paying a bribe. Two security guards arrested without charge and later found dead in a morgue. The list went on. By the late 2010s, the allegations had become impossible to ignore, and one platform, more than any other, was making sure of that. In late 2017, a video circulated on Twitter. It showed a mob chasing an unmarked SARS vehicle after officers allegedly killed a man. It was grainy, it was short, and it spread fast. Segalink, a Nigerian tech entrepreneur and activist, had already been building a case against SARS online. Now, with the video going viral, the hashtag he had helped popularize, #EndSARS, found its moment. Thousands of Nigerians took to Twitter to share their own stories. First-hand accounts of being beaten, extorted, and threatened by SARS officers flooded the platform. By December 2017, #EndSARS was trending in Nigeria for the first time. The response from SARS officials? They denied the allegations. A police spokesperson accused the campaigners of being criminals. He told Nigerians to file formal complaints with the police if they had concerns. The movement pushed forward anyway. A petition demanding the end of SARS was circulated and gathered over 10,000 signatures. It was then submitted to the Nigerian National Assembly. Nigerian officials promised reform. Again, a new law was passed making torture a criminal offense. But SARS itself was not disbanded. Acting President Yemi Osinbajo commissioned an investigation into SARS abuses, but his findings were never made public. SARS was renamed the Federal Special Anti-Robbery Squad, or FSARS for short. New leadership was appointed, and oversight was promised. In early 2019, the Inspector General of Police ordered FSARS to be dissolved. It was the fourth time in 4 years that authorities had announced some version of SARS shutdown. And just like the previous three times, nothing fundamentally changed. By 2020, Nigerians, particularly young Nigerians, had learned something important. Promises from the government would not be enough. On October 3rd, 2020, it happened again. A new video surfaced on social media, SARS officers beating and shooting a young Nigerian man in the Delta State. The footage went viral almost instantly, reigniting #EndSARS across Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. The years of documented abuse, the broken promises, the renamed units, all of it poured back into public conversation at once. 5 days later, on October 8th, the protests moved off the screen and into the streets. Largely peaceful, largely leaderless, and largely driven by Gen Z Nigerians, demonstrators gathered in Lagos and cities across the country. The movement had no single headquarters, it had no formal leadership structure. It was organized through social media, coordinated on the fly, and sustained by the collective rage of a generation that had grown up watching SARS abuse their peers. On October 10th, Nigerian police met protesters with water cannons and tear gas. One protester was reportedly shot dead. The commissioner of police in the region denied any responsibility. The next day, October 11th, the inspector general of police announced live on television that SARS was being disbanded. For many Nigerians, this announcement landed like a bad joke. They had heard it before. A new hashtag emerged, hashtag #EndSWAT. Protesters stayed in the streets. Through October 12th to October 19th, the government's response escalated. Protesters were arrested, a bystander was shot dead on the 12th. Cities across Nigeria were now under pressure, with demonstrations spreading far beyond Lagos. Then came October 20th. Following clashes between protesters and police and the declaration of a 24-hour curfew in Lagos, protesters gathered at the Lekki toll gate. This was a major intersection that had become a focal point of the demonstrations. Reports emerged that protesters had removed surveillance cameras at the gates. Then, members of the Nigerian army opened fire on the crowd. Nigerian officials initially reported 2 deaths, but a leaked internal document later put that number at a minimum of 11 people, with 4 others missing. Amnesty International, tracking the full scope of the deaths across the entire protest period, ultimately reported at least 56 protesters had been killed. The massacre at Lekki did not end the movement, but it did signal what the Nigerian government was ultimately willing to do to stop it. In the weeks following October 20th, the combination of lethal force and mass arrests effectively suppressed the large-scale demonstrations. Smaller protests continued, including peaceful gatherings when the Lekki tollgate reopened in February 2021. But at that procession, Lagos police fired tear gas at the crowd of commemorators. With SARS officially dissolved, the Nigerian government convened panels of inquiry in states across the country to investigate the abuses. Promises were made to compensate the families of those killed during the protests. But years later, justice remains largely elusive. In 2023, Amnesty International reported that at least 15 protesters were still being detained by police, 3 years after the movement. In 2025, many families of those killed during the 2020 protests have reported they still not had any compensation from the Nigerian government. Many Nigerians remain skeptical that the change was anything more than cosmetic. A unit renamed, a promise made, a pressure valve released. The human rights abuses that defined SARS were rooted in a broader culture of impunity within Nigerian security forces. Changing the unit's name did not change that culture. What hashtag #EndSARS did change was harder to measure, but no less significant. It demonstrated that Nigerian Gen Z, connected, organized, and unafraid, could mobilize at a scale that forced the government to respond. It showed that social media was not just a tool for complaining, it was an infrastructure for resistance. The hashtag #EndSARS movement did not end with justice for SARS abuses. It did not deliver accountability, and it did not bring justice to the families of those killed. But it established something important, that a generation of young Nigerians, armed with smartphones and a hashtag, could sustain a movement for years, take it into the streets, and force the most powerful institutions in their country to pay attention. That story, the gap between what was won and what was lost, is the story of Gen Z protest movements around the world. And it's a story that's far from over. Thanks for watching. Explore the full Revolution Will Be Digitized series and our interactive map of global Gen Z movements at the Aspirations Network link in the video description. If you enjoyed this episode, like and subscribe for future releases.